Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to our second installment in this three-part series on finding courage in community. I'll read a little introduction about the series and then I'll introduce our guest speaker. As our communities reckon with and begin to recover from the worst months of the ICE occupation, we're devoting our May Faith Forums to rediscovering ways of finding courage in community. We are doing this by exploring how the three Abrahamic faiths have found courage through communal spiritual practices of resistance, resilience, and restoration over generations past, present, and yet to come. Our speaker this morning is Dr. Tamim Saidi, who was born in Afghanistan and as a teenager was forced to leave his family behind and take refuge in Pakistan. He came to the USA in 1990, and since then, he has considered Minnesota home. He received his Doctor of Pharmacy from the University of Minnesota and holds an MDiv degree from Chicago Theological Seminary and Bayan Islamic Graduate School. In 2018, he was selected as one of 24 Bush Fellows. Additionally, he has completed a multi-religious fellowship program with the Collegeville Institute. In addition to serving as the resident scholar for IRG, Tamim serves in numerous community leadership positions with the Islamic Resource Group, Scholarship Islamic Center of Minnesota, Muslim Youth of Minnesota, Muslim Students Association Council of Trustees of the Islamic Center of Minnesota, and Al-Amal School Board of Directors Interfaith Dialogues. He has presented to thousands of Minnesotans about Islam and the cultures of Muslims. His articles have appeared at Engage Minnesota, the Star Tribune, Pioneer Press, USA Today, St. Cloud Times, and the Minnesota Daily, and he has also appeared on WCCO and TPT's Almanac. Tamim regularly delivers weekly sermons at multiple area mosques, serves as a Muslim chaplain, and conducts other religious rituals for the community. He is a father of 4 children and is a son, husband, and brother. Please welcome me. Please join me in welcoming.
I was just mentioning to Reverend Craig that I've been here 36 winters, by the way. Yeah, how long have it been? 12? 16. 16, okay.
Is that how you count?
Yes.
So thank you all for coming and being here. This is a courage by itself for you guys to come and have this discussion and open up these dialogues. So thank you so much for that. I was just thinking this morning that I have made a lot more slides than I had gonna have time for. So I'm gonna go over them quickly. You will have them. I think you're gonna have a recording on Zoom. You can take a look at it on Zoom also, and then I want to open up for more question and answer, which I think is the most important point. I should say, like not one, just one bad habit. What among my bad habits is that when I speak, when I'm excited, I speak really fast. If I do that, somebody please wave. I can slow down. So if that happens, please let me know. So quickly talking about courage. Courage is not lack of fear. It's acting in spite of the fear. It's understanding that, there's something more important that you have to work towards to overcome your fears. So this actually is, repeated by many of the great peoples throughout the history, not just recently. And the opposite, there's a statement like in Arabic and also on some other cultures that say, in order to know something, if you know the opposite of it, will help you understand it better. From opposite things are known sometimes. So the opposite of courage is phobias and fears, right? And in Islam, we have something, and for Muslims, there's something called Islamophobia, that there's a lot of people, and Islamophobia is kind of similar to racism and prejudice, and similar to like homophobia, anti-Semitism, and so on. So that's Islamophobia, which is the opposite of courage. And this picture, you guys probably have seen this. That's Representative Ilhan Omar being attacked by that guy in one of the town hall meetings that she had. I think this would be a good symbol of courage and hope, and also phobias. Right? She's being attacked, and actually, she was courageous enough to stand her ground and even lunge towards him, which was really one of those good things that happened. So I thought it was a good picture to have. One of the Muslim scholars of Middle Ages, Averroes, or Ibn Rushd in Arabic, his name, he actually had a really great saying, which I keeps on applying over and over, is that ignorance leads to fear, fear leads to hate, and hate leads to violence. And this is the equation. And on a more If you want a diagram for it, you have fear and ignorance and a test tube, and then results of hate. And usually, and a lot of people are afraid of something that they don't know about. And this is the cycle, like a vicious cycle that they mentioned. There's an ignorance of people have ignorance of people's cultures, race, and religion. So they are ignorant about those things. And they have a fear of change, fear of loss, fear of unknown. They don't know what they should be afraid of. And then that leads to hatred, prejudice, discrimination, and violence. And this, unfortunately, continues and repeats itself as a vicious cycle. And that continues throughout the ages in all different parts of the world as well. And this is what fear and Islamophobia looks like. I don't know if you guys remember this. This was a lady, a Muslim lady. She was in Applebee's having lunch with one of her friends, and some lady came in because she had a scarf on and she was speaking her native language. Another lady who was one of the guests at the Applebee, she grabbed a beer mug and smashed her in her face, and she had a major cut on her face. So this is what phobia and fears look like, unfortunately. And this is another one which happened to another Muslim woman in one of the gas stations that she was in. She got attacked by somebody for no other reason other than the fact that she was Somali and she was a Muslim. And also, what else does phobias look like? It shows up in school bullying and discrimination in schools. Actually, what is really disheartening is that they had some statistics nationwide for Muslims that 40% of Muslim families, they said that their children had experienced bullying in the school because of religious reasons. 40% of Muslim families. And from that, a quarter of them said that this was done by the teachers or the school staff members against young kids, right? So this is, this is what the opposite of courage is, which are the phobias and Islamophobias, or bullying in the school that results in death and suicide of some young people. Some young students. And also, this was actually also what happened. This was in Oregon, but this was this man who actually was a Muslim woman with a scarf sitting in the train, and he attacked with a knife. And two passengers actually stood up, which is again sign of courage and hope and courage. And they stood up to defend the Muslim lady, and he actually killed both of them, and he was apprehended and he was put in jail. So this is the kind of stuff that Muslims are feeling on a regular basis. There have been a lot of attacks on the mosques in Minnesota. Minnesota, unfortunately, even though I do believe they're and the Minnesota nice, there's a lot of nice people in Minnesota. But unfortunately, Minnesota has been leading the nation in incidents of hate, prejudice, and Islamophobia. Okay. So this was the numbers from 2002, 2003. We have some numbers coming up. In 2005, it was almost 700 incidents of hate and prejudice and bigotry against Muslims documented in Minnesota. 700, which was 100% more than the year before 2024. This was another young kid, 6 years old in Chicago, his landlord came with a knife and attacked him and his mother. The poor kid he died because of the wounds, and the mother was injured. And then also, I'm sure you probably remember the bombing of the mosque in Bloomington, the Dar al-Farouk Mosque in Bloomington, which the militiamen, the three of them were sentenced. There have been a lot of attacks on the mosque and different cities throughout Minnesota. Has been getting a lot of not just local but national attention. So Muslims have been worried. They have been on edge, and they have been anxious about what has been happening. So multiple incidents. So this is, I'm sure you guys, if you have paid attention, I'm sure you do with the local Minnesota incidents. Jilani Hussain, he is the head of the Minnesota Council on Islamic Relations, CARE Minnesota. He has been mentioning that over and over that Minnesota has been leading the nation in incidents of hate and prejudice and bigotry, unfortunately. So this is from 2025. It was a record high complaints. There were almost 700 civil rights, 96%, almost 100% increase from the year before. 40 documented incidents of arson, vandalism, intimidation, and discrimination, and about $3 million in damages to the mosque and properties for the Muslims. And this is just in 1 year, just the previous year. This is something other which is scary, is that the pyramid of hate that starts with some prejudice attitudes. People have, just feel like, well, it's not a big deal. They have some, a negative attitudes towards people that eventually leads to acts of prejudice, and then discrimination, and then violence, and then eventually genocide. This is the cycle that's been happening throughout the human history, unfortunately, in different parts also. So what does hope look like? Hope looks like when you have people from all the clergy of different faiths and backgrounds come back together and say, we are one Minnesota. We are all neighbors and we are brothers and sisters in humanity. We stand up for each other. We do not agree with what's happening here. And we have the imams and rabbis and priests and clergy of different faiths coming and standing up in protest against ICE and against all the other stuff that has been happening. That we have a lot of good show of courage and speaking out from the Somali community, which we'll talk about later, which makes up at least 60% of the Muslim population in Minnesota are from Somali or African backgrounds. So this is Senator Zainab Muhammad from Minnesota Senate. She has been speaking out. I'm sure you maybe have noticed her speaking out against all the hate and prejudice that the Somali community has been getting recently, and more, I should be more precise, specifically from the president, unfortunately, being attacked and targeted by the president of the United States, just as a community itself. And also, the other hope also is that she has been speaking out about different things, and members of the Somali community has been speaking out a lot. Jilani Hussain, the Muslim community, has been speaking out within their circles as much as they can. I think also the election of the New York mayor, Zoran Mamdani, was a sign of hope and courage also, that when he knew that when he was running, he's going to get a lot of Islamophobia, a lot of hate because of him being an immigrant, being a Muslim, and he got that. I mean, he got really a lot of Islamophobia, a lot of hate and prejudice because of his faith and because of being an immigrant. But I think he has been a sign of hope and courage and the Muslim community, nationally and even internationally, for him to get elected, and also to have some positive policies against ICE and against protecting the immigrants in the United States as well. And also, I don't know if you guys remember this, we had some guy, I don't even want to mention his name, that he actually came and tried to, his goal, literally, his stated goal was to try to cause division and violence and hate between the Christian and the Muslim community. Right? And he came and started saying all these negative things, and he brought a pig's head to try to attack the Muslims. And Muslims, just like Jewish people, Jewish folks, don't eat pork. So he brought some pig heads and all the other stuff, tried to throw at people, tried to have cause and division between the Muslim community and Christian community. He specifically mentioned that. And I think when he came here, the majority of the people who protested against him were not Muslims. They were our neighbors of all other faiths and backgrounds, Christians and Jews and people of no specific faith, and they came protested against him in Minnesota, including, I think it was in January or February, they actually sprayed him with water, which you can imagine what happens when you get water on you. So that was something good to see, that people stand up for their neighbors. And also another example of good courage and hope is that people of Twin Cities being named for the JFK's profile for courage. Like, people stand up. Actually, this was really interesting because during the month of Ramadan, which ended a couple of months ago, we had some guest speakers. We had some imams and scholars from different part of the different states who came in to speak and to do fundraisers for us. All of them told us, we are so impressed with Minnesota. What you guys are doing is really impressive. So I would say I'm really impressed with what you guys are doing. So thank you so much. And even people internationally are impressed with what's happening in Minnesota. My cousin was visiting, and she was on a vacation somewhere, I think in the Caribbean or somewhere, and then everybody had to mention like where they are from, right? And so I'm from such and such. She said, "Oh, we're from Minnesota." She got a standing ovation for being from Minnesota. That you guys stood up against ICE. So that was really an amazing thing for people. We have mentioned this multiple times, is that this really gives us hope that our neighbors can stand up for their neighbors. That, regardless of our differences, and we all have differences, even within our own communities, that people can stand up and say, these are the wrong things, and we stand up for what is right in our neighbors. And this is like from Minnesota Public Radio. You guys probably know about the Cedar Riverside apartments. I actually lived there for about a year and a half before moving out to the suburbs. And I'm also seeing the signs that, that Minneapolis, and I'm sure St. Paul, they love and they welcome their Somali and immigrant neighbors. I think those are all, and also having some protests and marches and solidarity with the Somali community and the Afghan community. The two, I mean, all immigrants have been hit a lot in Minnesota and also nationwide. But in Minnesota, the two communities that have been affected the most are the Somali community and the recent Afghan community. And the Afghans who came recently during the Biden administration, these were the majority of them were the people who were actually fighting on the side of the United States against the Taliban. They were literally at the forefront before the American soldiers would go in. They were at the forefront and side by side by the American soldiers to fight against the Taliban. And they came here because they knew if when the Taliban took over, if they had stayed, they would have killed them and they would have killed their families. So they had to flee to come to the United States, and they came in, and now they are being pushed out. They're told that you're not welcome anymore. Right? So I mean, I literally can imagine people are. I mean, and we have people like that who actually have been. They have died under ICE detention. They were healthy young people in their 30s and 40s that they have died under ICE detention because they know if they were to be sent back, they're going to get tortured, they're going to get executed. So the same is happening with a lot of people in other communities, other immigrant communities as well. With the refugees. So what else I want to mention briefly is I'm trying to hope that I can finish my discussion in 20 minutes so we can have a more Q&A. So 3 factors that can improve and remove phobias and hate and prejudice and bigotry. Number 1 is when they have looked at the people, if they had a functional knowledge of a group. If you understand something about Islam and Muslims, if you understand something about the Jews and Judaism and about Hindus and Hinduism and so on, right? So that actually helps a great deal, brings down the level of prejudice, discrimination, and bigotry. Number 2 is if you know you have a personal friend from that group, right? If you have a neighbor that you talk to, hopefully you have a good Muslim neighbor, right? That would really help a lot. If you have a coworker or a colleague or somebody you work with, that brings down the level of prejudice a lot. And then lastly, if you work on a joint project together. And so if you have the 3 of those, it brings it down from like almost 90% of people expressing hate and prejudice and phobias down to hopefully about 10% or so, which really shows about 10% of people are incurable. Doesn't matter what you do, it's not going to cure them, but nonetheless, it helps a great number of people with those. So with that, I want to quickly introduce to you what is Islam and what Muslims do, because I think a lot of people who don't realize, especially with the Christian community, how much more we have in common with our Christian and Jewish neighbors, people of Abrahamic faiths. So quickly about this, Islam really means peace through submission to God, to God's will. So peace and obedience to God's will. And also there are about 2 billion Muslims in the world. Muslims make up a quarter of the world population. Okay, so it's not like a small population. Muslims make up a quarter of the world population. Those are some of the Muslim majority countries around the world. But the largest portion of Muslims are in South and Southeast Asia, with Indonesia being the highest one of 230 million, in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and then Nigeria. Those are the top 5 countries with the highest Muslim population around the world. And then here are the other 5, so 10 Muslim countries, and then Nigeria, after Nigeria, Egypt, Iran, Turkey, Algeria, and Morocco. Those are the top 10 Muslim countries. And also understanding, just like with the Christian community, there are, I think, about 2.4 billion Christians in the world. Christians are not a monolithic community, right? The same is true for Muslims. About 2 billion Muslims in the world are not a monolithic community. There's a lot of diversity within the Muslim community. The Muslims are diverse and unique and a loving community. There's clearly not a monolithic community for the Muslims. Now, Muslims come from all different backgrounds, all different ethnic backgrounds, all different education levels, socioeconomic levels, and even how, if you want to mention, think about how conservative versus liberal they are throughout the spectrum in all different aspects, really. So we talk about Muslims. Muslims are the people. Islam is the religion, about a quarter of the world population, and Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. Okay. So there are about 3.5, almost 4 million Muslims in the US. Muslims make up about 1% of the population. And also, if you look at Minnesota, I think overall Muslims are about maybe 2% of the population. Maybe in the cities, maybe 3-4%, maybe. But if you look at the entire state, about 2%. of the overall population. In the US, I think it's about 1%. And Muslims have been here there are some historical records that show that at least a third of the enslaved Africans who were brought here in the 17th, 18th centuries, they were African Muslims. So Muslims have been here for a long time. Yes, not like Muslims came here recently. Well, of course, with a larger number came recently, but Muslims have been here for a long time. A quick background about Muslims. 28% identified as Black or African, 24% as Asian, 20% as white, 12% as Arab, 9% as Hispanic, and then all other backgrounds. This is nationwide. And Minnesota is estimated that about at least maybe 60 to 65% of the Muslims are from an African background, Somali and other African countries. So close to 200,000 Muslims in Minnesota. And also I should probably briefly mention that as you can imagine, with Christians in Minnesota versus South America versus Europe versus Africa versus Asia, right? Even if they are from the same denomination, they're going to have different cultures. They're going to how they dress, how they speak, what they eat is going to be different. The same is true for Muslims. Muslims coming from different parts of the world, they have different cultures, even though they have the same religion. So there's a lot of diversity within that for Muslims also. Quickly about beliefs in Islam, Muslims believe in the one God. We'll talk about God briefly. Angels, holy books of God, prophets, day of judgment, and a divine decree from God. Okay. And usually when I go to the churches, I ask people, how many of you believe in God? How many of you believe in angels, holy books, prophets, day of judgment, and a divine decree from God, right? So the beliefs are very in that, of course there are differences, but there's a lot of similarities in those as well. So when Muslims talk about God, Muslims believe God is the creator of all things. Muslims, the name that he used for God is Allah. Allah is an Arabic name for God, for the one God, the creator of the universe, the one God who created everything out of nothing. So what Muslims say Allah, they're talking about that, the one God who created Adam and Eve, the one God, the God of Abraham, the God of Noah, the God who saved Noah from his family from the flood, the God who spoke to Moses and sent the Torah to Moses, and the same God that Jesus prayed to and worshipped and prostrated to. So Muslims believe when we say Allah, when we say God, that is the one God, not a different God, but the one God. And also Allah is in Arabic. I think I probably have some slides coming up. Allah has the same name that the Christian Arabs use in the Middle East. If you were to ask Lebanese Christians or Palestinian Christians or Egyptian Christians also, how do you say God? They also say Allah. Either if you were to read the Arabic Bibles, when it says Allah, God in English, it says Allah in Arabic. Okay, so Allah is an Arabic name for God. I don't want to go too much over my time. Muslims believe God is beyond our imagination. God is not a man or a woman, or male or female for that matter. God is infinitely compassionate, infinitely kind, infinitely forgiving, infinitely gracious, all-knowing, all-seeing, all-hearing. And quickly about Jesus, I should mention, since we are in a church, so maybe I should do true and false quickly. True and false. Muslims believe Jesus is a prophet and a messenger of God. Who says true? Okay, very good. True. Yeah. True or false? Muslims believe that Jesus is the Messiah or the Christ.
True.
True. Muslims do believe he's the Messiah and the Christ. Actually, he's called the Messiah. In Arabic, it's called Al-Masih Isa ibn Maryam, the Messiah, Christ, Christ, the son of Mary. So he's called by that name 11 times specifically. So Muslims do believe that he is the Christ or the Messiah. Muslims believe in his virgin birth. True or false? Jesus is called Word of God. This is things true. True. Muslims do believe he's called Word of God, right? True or false? Muslims believe that he is part of the deity and he should be worshipped. False. Thank you. Muslims don't believe that he was God. So Muslims do believe he's called Word of God, a spirit from God, righteous, pure. Muslims actually also believe in his second coming of Jesus, and also the mother of Jesus, Virgin Mary, is mentioned. She is, by the way, the name of the only woman who is mentioned by name in the Quran is Mary. Okay. So the name of our youngest daughter is Maryam, which is the Arabic version for Mary. So Mary is considered to be the best woman of the humanity. And then lastly, I would just probably would end with this quickly, or maybe have one more slide after this. So the five pillars in Islam is declaration of faith. We'll talk about this. Muslims pray 5 times a day. We're supposed to give charity and alms to the poor, fast during the month of Ramadan, which we have heard of, and make a pilgrimage to Mecca once in a lifetime. And this is the most important pillar for Muslims, called the testimony of faith, that says that there is no God but the one God. There is none worthy of worship but the one God. So no God but God, and that Muhammad is the messenger of God, the last messenger of God. Because as Muslims, we believe in Jesus and Moses and Abraham, all of them through Muhammad on him, and all of the prophets. Okay. So how do you counter Islamophobia? Build coalitions with other communities, continue to demystify Islam, go beyond doing just interfaith work, and make some Muslim friends. And also, I think I'm going to skip over this. What does hope and courage look like? It looks like, of course, with Renee Good and Alex Preddy, of course, all the hundreds of thousands of people who protested. And also looks like you. I wanted to put a mirror and say, this is what courage looks like. This is the courage looks like to organize a program like this, to invite your people. It's not an easy thing to do. I'm sure there are some people within the community who criticize you. How could you have a rabbi to come in, or an imam to come in, or somebody else to come and tell us about the faith, right? So that's what it takes, courage. So why don't you thank you for that, and I'll stop so we can do some Q&A.
First of all, thank you for mentioning that Mary is the best woman of humanity. One of our biggest fears is the rise of white Christian nationalism. Can you comment on what that's like for you and your community? Is there any hope of bridging some of these gaps?
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge. One of our good friends, Dr. Todd Green, he is a professor of, it was like a theology professor, I think, in Luther Seminary in Iowa. I think he's moved to Washington since then. And they just recently, him and one of his colleagues wrote an article recently saying that, and that exactly that, because people generally what do you call this, the evangelical or religious nationalism, the people who actually literally they want to have religious nationalism, Christian nationalism, they are trying to scare people off. Oh, Muslims are going to bring Sharia law or something like that, right? So the article that they had, it was on USA Today a couple of weeks ago, maybe 2-3 weeks ago. They said that the rise of religious nationalism is not coming from Muslims; it's coming from the Christian right. From a lot of people like that. Is there hope? I think there's hope. There's actually, I mean, from what I'm seeing is that Tucker Carlson, who's getting more media nowadays, he actually has been saying publicly, and even Megyn Kelly, which of course I don't always find myself agreeing with him and everything else, but they're saying that all these years since September 11, we have been fed, we have been forced to understand, listen, and accept a lot of lies about Muslims, right? Which is not true, because this was all an orchestrated, funded by billions of dollars, try to put fear of Muslims in the minds of the average American. All right. So there are some voices from the Christian right also are mentioning things, but that is pretty scary thing to have. Because in Texas, what had happened is obviously it's still a Republican majority state, and the governor is a Republican. And what they did was the Muslims are trying to, they actually bought land. I think, I'm not sure how many, it was like a large land that they were going to do some developments next to a mosque. That was open to anybody. Anybody can buy, anybody buy land. And the government and the attorney general, they actually went and stopped Muslims from expanding and having that community over there. They stopped them for no good reason other than just to cause phobias and fear and intimidation. Stopped the mosque from having funeral programs, like the washing the body and burial and things like that. They actually went when there was like Islamic schools in Texas. they have like a voucher program that people can take their children to a private school and the government will pay for them. They excluded Muslim schools from that specifically. No other faiths, like Christians and Jews and and maybe Hindus, if they have their own schools, they can go and actually get the government funding to go to the religious school, but they exempted, actually excluded Muslims from being part of that group. So those are very much worrisome things for Muslims to see. And when you have hate like that specifically coming, like from what President Trump has been saying specifically about the Somali community, right? It's like really, I mean, can you imagine being a 12, 13, 14-year-old Somali kid, boy or a girl, going to a school and the president is attacking you and your community? How would you feel about that? I mean, I was actually just yesterday we had a good discussion with about maybe it was about 24 of us yesterday. We had a group of imams and leaders and also some Christian clergy. And one of the Somali imams said that, we know that there are some people within our community who committed fraud probably, right? But, if you were to imagine the Somali community is 100,000 people, if not 120,000 people. Even if you have 100 people, that's still 99.9% of them had nothing to do with that. But also, if you would look at any community, if it's a Christian community, Jewish community, Hindu community, there are people who have done frauds and all the evil and wrong things that they have done, right? But to blame the entire community for the actions of a few, that is literally what discrimination and what prejudice and racism looks like. You cannot blame the entire community for the actions of a few. So yeah, it is bothersome for us to take a look at that, unfortunately.
You said one way to counter this process is to have a common project. And in Rochester, where Mary and I lived and worked for many years, there are many Somali people working in healthcare. So I had a common project with them, who was my mother, because she had dementia and was in a memory center, and we witnessed the most loving care of her and others with dementia by largely many Somali caregivers, which really does leave an indelible.
It does for sure. Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. That's absolutely true. But I think what I mentioned about the Senator Zainab Muhammad, what she has been saying also, which a lot of people in the community and even the governor has said, is that Somalis and Muslims are ever field in America and the United States. Right? I mean, there was actually this professor, John Esposito, he's a professor of theology. I think he was with Georgetown University. He said, one day he had to go to the emergency room. He went to the emergency room. The first nurse who took him in was a Muslim nurse. And then he saw somebody else. And then eventually the doctor that saw him at the emergency room was also a Muslim. Right? So Muslims are part of all the day-to-day activities, your next door neighbor, your Uber driver, and also the people who are brain surgeons and heart surgeons and rocket scientists. So in every field. They're pretty much part of the community. Great.
This might be a bit on the personal side, so forgive me, but I'm curious, since you're raising children here in this state, and you commented on some of the challenges that we experience here very locally, how do you encourage your children not to, fear everybody and to, kind of perpetuate this us and them sort of viewpoint?
Yeah. It's tough. It's difficult. I mean, I remember during the height of when ICE was all over and breaking doors and taking people into custody and sending people to Texas. And my daughter was telling me, Dad, I'm so worried that ICE might take me. I mean, what should I do? Should I take my passport with me? Because our kids are born and raised here. I'm like, yeah, just take your passport. If you have to ask you can turn on your video, get your camera, show them your passport, everything else, and videos. And then also I've been encouraging my children, also the communities, to be more involved as much as you can. Try, generally, I think as Muslims, and I think it's maybe a true natural thing for most people, is to try to be inwardly. We have to say a lot of things within our own circles, right? And people outside do not hear us. I think one of the efforts that we have done, including like what we do with IRG, is to go out and reach out to the general population, tell them who Muslims are, who we are, what we do, so they don't get to hear something on the news and say, oh my gosh, this is what Muslims are like. There's a statement that says that if you were to only find out about airplanes from the news, you only get to see the ones that have crashed. Right.
That's true.
I mean, literally, like millions of planes probably fly every week. You don't see about all of them. The only ones that the news would show you is the one that have crashed. Right. So if you hear something about the Muslims in the news, that is the worst of the worst, like 0.01% of the Muslim population that they have done something like that. Right. So that's the nature of news. I mean, so I think, the best thing is to have some courage, and also all of us try to reach out to our neighbors to say, hey, how you guys are doing, maybe take some cookies, maybe invite them to lunch or go visit them or something like that. Even when I do my sermons, I encourage the Muslim community to invite your neighbors over. Sometimes don't make the food so spicy. Because the food is sometimes, especially in some cultures, don't make it too spicy because, for a lot of cultures, if it's not spicy enough, it's not delicious enough. So they want to, so like, if you're inviting your, neighbors who are not from your own culture, tone down the spice a little bit, but invite them over, have a discussion with them. And what else is great is that Minnesota Council of Churches, and our common friend Cynthia, Reverend Cynthia, was part of that, that Minnesota Council of Churches, they have been working with different mosques every Ramadan that they had, they call them taking heart iftars. So I think last Ramadan, about 17, 18 different mosques, they opened up their doors. They had invited their neighbors so people could come in. I think 4,000 people, Minnesotans actually went visit the mosque. They listened to maybe like an Islam 101 presentation. They observed how Muslims pray. Then they had dinner. They broke their fast with their Muslim neighbors at the sunset. So that will be something to consider if you haven't done it already for next year. Or if you guys want to do like a field trip, you're always welcome. We can arrange a field trip for you guys to go visit a mosque, or go listen to a sermon on Fridays. Let us know. Would love to arrange it for you to do that. Actually, just a couple of weeks ago, we had this young man. I was giving the sermon in St. Thomas. He said, well, I want to come. My teacher is offering if I were to go into a different religious practice, I will get some extra credits. Can I come and watch? Can I come and observe the prayer? I said, oh, you're welcome. Of course, come. And so, he came in. There was another girl also from a Catholic background. They came in and they said that, it took a lot of courage for me to do this. It was not an easy thing to do, right? So, and then we also had a group. We usually have a lot of people come and visiting the mosque for us, but it takes courage to do that. It's not an easy thing. It's not within our comfort zone, right? But also, we all know that for us to grow, we have to work outside our comfort zone to push that boundaries a little bit more and more as much as we can. So if you guys are, willing to do that, if you can do a field trip, and we would love to have you guys visit, and we can have. I think in a couple of weeks we actually have a group of evangelical Christians who are visiting us. So you're all welcome to visit us whenever you have time. So I think that would be a good thing to do. Then you're not only hearing and learning about Muslims from the news, which is the last thing you want to do. Yeah.
So how are Muslim groups finding courage for themselves, for yourselves during this time of amazing discrimination and
I think probably the biggest one is faith in God. Believing that there's the creator of the universe, that these are, that God is testing us. Muslims believe all the challenges and difficulties are tests from God, that God is going to test our faith, our patience, and our perseverance, that God is going to test us, and we need to do the best to stay steadfast and not to cave in. But also to be smart, not to be unwise and doing things. And the second thing is with community. Try to connect with the community to see what you can do, try to reach out and try to help each other. And then also to connect with the larger community as well also. And I think, I think overall for most of the Minnesota representatives, the governor, lieutenant governor, the senators, most of the representatives have been very friendly towards the Muslim community, which has been really good thing to see. The Attorney General, of course, Keith Ellison is a Muslim, but he has been all support of all the immigrant communities all along. So those are positive things. Try to help those things to have faith and try to connect and help each other and try to make some groups to deliver food for the people who may not be able to get out of their houses. And during those times, we had some Muslim businesses that they were closed for an entire month. Like Muslim restaurants were not open for an entire month. We're talking to one of our friends. He said, we lost business for an entire month. because they had their workers who would come in, the ICE people would go and hide inside the garbage cans and all those other things. And as soon as they would jump and try to arrest them and ask them for their IDs. I mean, they were not illegal people. They were here. They were on papers. They had filled their papers, or they had green cards, and they would harass them and take them in, and they would lose say, well, even though I'm legal, I don't want to be put in jail for a week. What's going to happen to my children? Right. So a lot of that was happening. So, true, first of all, trust and hope in God, prayers and God and prayers, and then community, and then the larger community, and then everything else that they can do to be supportive of that.
I have a 101 question.
Sure.
Can you walk us through what happens in terms of customs and rituals when a member of the community dies?
Yeah, sure. So when somebody does, generally, Muslims believe that the understanding is that as human beings, we are spiritual creation, spiritual creatures, or spiritual creation with a physical body, not physical bodies with a spirit. Where spiritual creation was a physical body. So Muslims believe that when we die, when the soul or the spirit separates from the body, this is very difficult for the soul. It's very difficult for the soul to see this. So Muslims generally would try to bury the person, try to expedite that transition of the soul from this world to the next as soon as possible. So they try to bury the person within 24 hours if possible. So if the person dies in the morning, in a lot of Muslim countries, they'll try to bury them before the sunrise, before the sunset. If it's not, the next day they'll try to bury, unless they're waiting for somebody to come from, different parts of the country or world and so on. They try to bury the person as soon as they can, to try to make it to be easy on the soul and the spirit of the person. And then when the person dies, they'll try to, it's also, probably should mention, is that the same dignity and respect and privacy that will be given to the body of a living person should be given to a dead person. So not to expose the body, not to show the people, not to show it to people who are not from immediate family and so on. And then there would a few immediate family members, or maybe an imam or somebody would go and wash the body with soap and water 3 times, and then they would wrap the body with white cloth, like a shroud, and then they would take the body to a mosque or somewhere for the funeral prayers to be prayed on. They will, of course, they will let the community know, the family, that the prayer is going to be tomorrow or something like that. So everybody would come in, and then they would pray the prayer on the person in a mosque. Usually, if it's possible, they would take the body to a mosque. They had a washing area to wash the body, and then they would pray on the person as a community, and then they would take the body and bury the person into the ground. And generally, the Muslim practice says that the body would be ground directly to the ground without a box or metal coffin and things like that. So in Minnesota, I think that's not possible. So they actually do put some concrete slabs around the body for that. And then they would just cover the body. They make some prayers for the person, and then they would offer condolences for the family. It's a good practice, traditional practice, that then the community would try to bring like meals for the family for the next few days or week or whatever they can. So while they are grieving and mourning, they don't have to actually try to go cook and try to feed themselves also. So try to show some support for the community also. There's a lot of other cultural practices, but this is basically mostly a religious part of it. So generally, I mean, we talk about the cycles of grief, like, the Islamic practices tries to expedite that so people can get out of the cycle of grieving and mourning, as soon as possible. So they can, so they try to offer condolences and prayers and all those other things for people.
Oftentimes I found that the arts are a way for us to learn about a different religion or culture. Is there a film or a novel or a piece of music or a work of art that you think, for somebody who has never encountered Islam, that they might start with a film or a novel, a piece of music or a work of art?
Great question. I'm not a great art person, so maybe.
Okay.
So let me think about what I can think of. So there's actually an older movie. I think it's pretty good. I think it was made in the early '80s. It's called The Message. I think Anthony Hopkins is in that, or Anthony Quinn. So I think that's a good movie. It was about the life of the prophet, about how he was appointed as a prophet, and early. I think that's a good message.
Okay.
There's a cartoon movie also about him. I think it's called The Messenger of Muhammad. I think that's probably available on Amazon Prime or some other things that you can watch. There's a nice movie about one of the companions of Prophet Muhammad called Bilal, Bilal. He was one of his companions, one of the somebody from was Ethiopia of this time. He was a slave that was in Arabia that the Prophet Muhammad and his companions freed him. So then eventually he becomes a leader in the community. Bilal has about his life. I think that's a good movie. Our middle son's name is Bilal. So that's why I remember that. Let's see what else. There's some other good ones also. Try to think what else we could. I'm sure there's a lot of novels and everything else that you can also look. Some of you may have already read. It's a novel. That's not true. The Kite Runner, about the story of the Afghani family. So it's like, it's a sad story also, but nonetheless talks about some of the things. It's not a true story. I thought that was good. See what else. Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, I would imagine also some of you may know Cat Stevens. He converted to Islam, changed his name to Yusuf. And he has some really good music. He has been trying to do some. He left music for at least an entire decade. Then he came back doing some music. So he has done some really good work also. You can actually find some of his songs are on YouTube as well, some of the recent ones. And we have some things that you can watch. See what else. There are a number of artists also of you. I would imagine. I haven't, unfortunately. I haven't done a lot of work on that, so that's what comes to mind right now.
Thank you.
That's a good question. Yeah.
Excuse me, I just finished reading, I don't know how accurate it is, it's very accessible, Karen Armstrong's book, called Muhammad.
Yeah.
And it's not long, it's
Right.
short, but I found it to be very interesting and readable and kind of
Yeah.
gives you the setting of how Muhammad first came into in the background in Arabia, and that's, which I thought was very useful, very interesting.
Yeah.
So
No, I remember reading it. It was like so it was a really great book. I like that. There were a few, and I'm sure there was a few places I did not agree with her, but I'm sure, but I think overall I think it was an amazing book. Really good book.
So Omar Said has just been endorsed by the DFL as a school board candidate for City of St. Paul. What is your hope for this gentleman in terms of working with the community and how the community can best respond to the needs of your community?
Great. I've heard about it. I don't know him personally, but we know we have a number of other Muslim school board members. We have one person in Wayzata schools. We have a couple in Minneapolis schools and other schools also. I think that's great to have a Muslim voice there to say what Muslim students need, so Muslim students would also feel included, that they have a voice, that they're part of the community also. And I'm sure just like you do, like Sharon Amin does in Minneapolis schools, and Heidi Cater does in Wayzata, that they would not only be representing the Muslim students, they would represent the entire student population, but also would be a voice for the Muslim students as well also. The challenges that Muslim students have had is that, of course, the majority are Christians. The majority of people here are, of course, from a Christian background, and people don't realize how things are Christian centric or Christian focused that is, right? Because of course, then they say, well, why do you guys need Muslims pray on Fridays? Why do you need Fridays off? Why can't you just do it on Sundays? Well, we don't ask extra days off for our religious holidays. Well, that's because every Sunday is off, right? Every Easter is off. Every Christmas is off, right? So it's not like you have to ask for it because that's already put into the calendar. For Muslims, they're still a minority, and that's not the case. So some of the school districts are actually considering giving Muslim students an extra day off during the Eid prayers. Or at least not to schedule an exam during the Eid prayers that they have. And then I know that's happening in a lot of the other in the East Coast in New York, New Jersey, that they're giving and they're taking a day off for Eid, so Muslims can go celebrate those things. They're allowing students to go pray, to have a prayer about 15-20 minutes for the midday prayer on Fridays. So student led. I was in Wayzata a couple of weeks ago. Had a discussion with their Muslim student associations. They have, I think, 200 Muslim students in Wayzata High School. So they try to do like a student led Friday prayers. there to try to organize, to do something, to do like a weekly prayer amongst themselves. To do that. So those are important for Muslims to feel that they're part of the community. They are welcome and accepted just like everybody else is. So I think those are good things great things to have. Other questions? General things also doesn't have to be about what you talked about.
I think we're set and we appreciate this so much.
Yeah, of
Thank
course.
you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks so much.